How's everybody doing? Yeah? All right, we want an interactive session, so we are sugaring people up. Who's that? Raise your hand if this is your first Working Parents event. Okay, welcome. We had a, this is our second event total, so you're not but we were really encouraged when we had our first Working Parent event with the dialogue and the connection. I think everyone left feeling like, wow, it's good just to share. I'll briefly recap. The most important thing is that we are a donut-based community. That's why, these are necessary to survive the parenting vocation. I think we established that in the last meeting. This whole community is, just to maybe recap the first discussion, about working together to find the right balance of being the parents we want to be and being the professionals we want to be, and recognizing that both are unattainable goals and that the tension between the two is hard. And it's hard for a lot of different ways, and how it's hard progresses from different stages of, from pregnancy through early childhood, through multiples and twins, and all the way into empty nesting and so on and so forth.
Who's twins? You have twins? Oh.
We have some that have twins. I have
twins.
Do you really? How old are yours?
8.
Okay. Boy and girl?
I have a 16-year-old and 2 8-year-olds.
Wow.
All girls.
Okay. Identical twins or?
No, they don't look anything alike.
They don't look anything alike. Okay. Okay. Yeah, because there's challenges there. Which one's which? That's how the joke always went. Remember, he said, I just carry a picture of one. And people go, I thought you had twins. And he goes, yeah, but they both look like that. So I'll introduce this topic and then get out of the way because we only have an hour. But the topic of guilt came up, and it came up a lot. And, it was something that we thought was important to explore. And it's something that is true in parenting even if you're not working. And it's almost an epidemic in parenting. If you search parental guilt, any idea how many search results you get?
18 million.
Yeah, 7 million, probably rapidly growing to 18. So, I think as Deborah's going to help us think through, some of it might be there for a purpose, but it's really easy to overdo it. I will also say, just to add this because I observed it, particularly for moms and women who are working parents, it really feels like an epidemic. And the way I would describe that is my wife, who was an educator and then chose to stay at home. Even she'll sometimes feel guilty about, well, I made that decision, so now I'm just at home and I'm not working. And if you work, you feel guilty because you're working and you're not at home. And if you work and you're at work, you feel guilty that you're not with your kids. And if you're working and you're at home, then you feel guilty because you're not working, and you literally can't escape it, right? So the intent of this community is just to open up dialogue and talk about, are there things Capital can be doing to help, and things we can be doing to each other to help. So I'll introduce Deborah. So number one, Deborah, welcome to Capital. Thank you for doing this. So she's doing this on her time as a volunteer because this topic was of importance to her. So Deborah is a child, adolescent, family psychotherapist, school counselor, and director of educational programs in health psychology?
Yes.
So that's a lot. And a mother of 3, including 2 twins. But she has advanced training at Harvard Medical School in stress physiology, in mind-body medicine, child psychotherapy with a private practice in Newport Beach and Tustin. And she's here just to give her observations and maybe some of her experience, and then open up for Q&A and dialogue. So my only ask of you guys is, it's a community, so the more we talk, the better this is going to go. So please be active in the discussion. And Deborah, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much. So
Round of applause. We do preemptive applause.
So thank you so much for having me. I'm looking around to see if I know anyone, because Capital Group is such a huge part of Irvine, and I live in Irvine, and I'm looking to see if I see any friends. So you're all my friends now because I don't see anyone familiar. So interesting, Wendy, I'm forgetting Wendy's last name, but Wendy Smith, yes, I know her family and we have circles together. So she asked me to be part of a discussion on guilt. And I said, oh, well, guilt? I mean, what's that? Like, nobody has that. What do you want me to talk about? So I put together some slides and a discussion. And I really appreciate that the large organization that you have really looks to their parent community to build an alliance, because this is a large company, but we all bring our own stories and we all bring our own families, or we leave them home and we come here. Sometimes we take our work home, and sometimes we take our families to work with us in our heads, in our hearts, of course. So the fact, organizational behavior and leadership is something that PhD, I'm thinking about getting a PhD in this. So it's interesting that I'm at corporations, because that's where I started. Like my bachelor's was in organizational behavior, and then HR, and then I got into software, and then I really realized that I wanted to be in the relationship business, and then got my license as a marriage and family therapist. So primarily I work with children, but when you're working with children, you have to work with families because it's a relationship, a system. And so in a corporation, it's also a system. You have to have healthy employees. So to open this up to your employees, I applaud you for doing that.
Yeah, you're going to start.
And that this is the second opportunity, so I'll do my best to pay it forward to the next person that comes in and speaks. So, okay, so I have twins. I'm a professional, and yes, I have a daughter that is going off to college in a year. So, deep breath. And I do a lot of research. So when I say that, I did research back in Harvard, I'm originally from New York, so you'll recognize my New York accent. My daughter's name is Sarah, and she says, "No, Mom, my name is Sarah." And I said, "No, your name is Sarah." And so right there's conflict, right? So just by my accent. So when somebody says we're all feeling really guilty for leaving our kids and going to work, that to me realizes that you have a moral compass. And actually, a moral compass, when you feel guilty, means one, that you're not pathological, and two, that you're a better worker. And you're a better friend, because you have a compass that's leading you in the right way. Now, if you didn't have a moral compass, you would just go to work and there wouldn't be a relationship. So the relationship that you have with your family, it is difficult. Let me say, it is probably, this stage of my life is probably the most difficult, because I do have 3 hats, 4. Oh, and I'm married. I forgot about my poor husband. Oh my gosh. Like my relationship with my husband, it does feel like juggling. And so I have some material here about a checklist for self-care, because at the end of all of this, when we're looking at what the science says about guilt, it is curable, but it never does go away. It's just about your perception and how we manage it. So I wanted to talk, and it's not actually moving. So how do I put this on the screen? Let's see. It's not hooked up to there. I want you to see my slides.
This is highly unusual.
What did I do? Do something in here? Screen.
I gotta tell you, I've never actually seen that before.
Resume slideshow. Okay, let's visit slideshow.
Yeah, but it's-
Oh, there we go, got it.
Oh,
Thank you.
I totally help by standing
So when
It was
I
moral
talk-
support.
Thank you. Sometimes that's all that matters. So I looked up guilt, and it said the fact of having committed a specific or implied offense or crime. So why did guilt come up? Why is this a subject that Capital One wanted to find a professional to come in and talk about? Can we just get some dialogue? And how do you feel about guilt? Is it guilt about that you don't make enough money? There's the HR person. Is it guilt that you are working too much? Like, just give me like 3 things. What is it guilt?
I feel guilty when my daughter asks me, how come you're not there or volunteering, or they have an activity like function at school. And she said, I was looking for you, Mommy, but I didn't see you. And right there when she says that,
Here's the knife. You're not in the classroom to volunteer. Ever? Ever. You're never there. Is it possible that that's all or nothing thinking? Yes, she of course is looking for you, and that hurts. So when you are hurt, you're just cut off at the head, right here. You're not, I mean, your heart is just all over, just bleeding. And your head is saying, what can I do? What have I done? Well, I'm not doing enough. So all that self-negative talk. But I'm wondering if I'm going to just challenge that. Is it really that you're never going to be in the classroom? So the all or nothing thinking is kind of a distortion, and it is very real. So acknowledging you weren't there at that time, but you could be there another time. So I'll talk a little bit about cognitive distortions after we pick you up off the floor and finish you up. What else?
I've got one, but so this, so the phones, like the times when like I'll be checking email on my phone because 6 minutes have passed and I haven't checked email, but sometimes I'm compelled, and my kid is telling me about what they did, any of the four, that day, and you feel like I'm not really mindful, I'm not really present. And even as they're telling me, I'm realizing I'm not even listening to their story, I'm thinking about work. So there's a little bit of, disconnecting, and being conscious about disconnecting. That's a real challenge in this era.
So you feel guilty, your phone, if my phone rang right now, which I hope it doesn't, there's a neurological response to that because everyone has my ringtone. Somebody in this room has my ringtone. If my ringtone happened, a neuroresponse was you check your wallet, you check wherever you keep your phone. And so we do have to keep that into check because social media is a wonderful, I have a business on social media and my phone. There is a disconnect. There has to be a time when we shut it down. And children know that as well. It is a time suck. It is a energetic, when that phone rings or you have to check, I would say that I'll give you my card and you can come in and we can talk about it.
Oh, we have way bigger things to talk about than that.
But it's very real. So shutting it down. So as a mom of a teenager, we take the phone and at 9 o'clock. Well, she's going to University High School. She has her phone for school, for playing her music, and actually looking things up while she's doing her homework until probably midnight. University High School, any high schooler parents in here from University High School? Okay, so it's highly competitive and these kids are up until all hours of the night studying. So it is balance. And so when the kids are around, we can say 5 minutes and really keep it to 5 minutes. It's very difficult, I know. I check emails and I just want to validate you that it is definitely something that, what is the word I'm looking for? It is an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to realize, so now that you are aware, the universe just heard you, and now you can make a declaration that you will shut it down at a certain time or put it in your pocket, because that's taking away from your family time, which is kind of imbalancing the work and family relationship. So who else is daring enough to be another? What do you feel guilty about?
I like the comparison of other mothers that are home all the time, and they know everyone at school, and they're running the PTA, and you hardly know a person's name at school when you walk in.
You know what? That's something we're going to have to give up because that's their job, and they will be your best friend because they will know everyone. And guess what? They want to know you because they're not out working in a field, and they need to know what's going on outside the home and in their community. So it is a collaboration between women and families to share the time. You've heard of it takes a village, whatever political side you're on, it does. And it does sting when they are at the volunteer opportunity and they do know someone. So if you can go in and just let your name known, and then open that dialogue. Isn't that what this is about, is the dialogue? I watch moms run around the classrooms and run around the school and the fundraisers. Well, I have a 16-year-old and I have 8-year-olds. I've done that before. I did that, and now this is my stage of life where I'm going to let them do what they need to do. And if they need me for a field trip, they know to call me because I've had that dialogue. I hear you. So what I wanted to talk about is, unless you have one more too.
I did. I don't know that it can be addressed quickly. Mine is about like energy apportionment. So what happens is, some days I'm just in the flow and I get home and I have all the energy in the world, and other days I am so deeply in it, but not in the flow. I am tired and exhausted and cranky, and I get home and I have nothing left for my kids. And
Well,
I've
that's
even
never happened to me.
and so like my 8-year-old, I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, and my 8-year-old gets it. So he'll be like, why are you so tired? Why is it that you only want to read a book and you can't like, you can't do, like I say, I didn't make very wise choices today, so I used everything at the office, which leaves me like, here having this uncomfortable conversation with you where I know it sounds like that means that I don't value you as much as I value my job. And so I'm kind of working on, obviously at the office, trying to find when I've gone from flow to, I have to get this done, because that's where the exhaustion comes up. But for me, that's where the big guilt is from, is going, oh man, I used up everything that I had emotionally at the office, where generally folks don't care as much as my kids do.
So do you have someone at home, or a helper, or grandparents, or a husband, or a babysitter, or all of them? Because that will still happen if you had that, if we all have
Yes.
support, it still happens then on a daily basis. So the first thing that I would ask is, are we eating correctly? Are we eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or at least a snack? Is there a certain time of day that you're really low? And what we're teaching our children is that we are human, and we are teaching our children that they too will have those ebbs and flows. And if you're seeing that on Friday, it's consistent, and so I'm asking everyone to really pay attention to your daily diet of information, because so much information is coming at us. I'm wondering how we're getting that out. And I say it's more of a hygiene of how we look at our family life, our self-life, and our work life, and seek a balance, and that's very difficult. So consistency and routines is very important, and then also a checklist. Is it always Friday? Is it always when I'm seeing that boss? Or is it always when I am not eating? Or, I'm making jokes about this, and this is really very important material that we have, that guilt is something that keeps us responsible for doing wrong things. So now that you're noticing that, you know what, maybe that day you aren't eating, or 3 weeks, maybe a mental health day. Whatever it takes, it seems like Capital Group is going to be supportive, because look at this community right here. I'm hoping that you can eat as we go. This is totally fine, it's comfortable for me to multitask, because that's what it takes in modern society. I think that when we have regrets, it signals that something is wrong, and we need to pay attention. So I think I mentioned something about, no, it's not working over here. This is really bugging me. Okay.
Working up there.
It is?
Yep.
Oh.
Do you want me to come stand over you again?
It's over here, but it's not here. So come stand over here.
I
Maybe if
couldn't
I
solve
click
that.
here, okay, I guess I can do that. Nope, it's not working. Okay, let's start over. Well, this is a really good one while we figure this out. Feeling, okay, so all my neuroscience slides are not going to be presented. I don't know what's going on. So let's look here. So if we could,
If you talk this one, I can see if I can figure that out.
okay.
Or if
So-
anyone more technical is in the room.
So the neuroscience research shows that our brains actually reward us for feeling guilty, because guilt and shame activates the brain in the reward system, and it's not even up there. So
Here, just keep it.
maybe a plug.
I'll just try this.
Activating the similar areas in our brain, so when our brains are activated and we're paying attention, we can do something about it, or we can ignore it. We can ignore it by shutting down certain areas of the brain. Okay, now.
This is getting even weirder.
This is Capital Group, you'll figure it out. So when we're activating the brain in terms of, I'm feeling guilty, the brain then says, well, what's the reward? Or what's the, I just want to go to sleep. And so that's where we can then be activated in our consciousness, is to make a decision. Do I want to drink more alcohol, or do I want to actually go to the gym and do yoga? There's things in between that, of course, but I'm using that as an analogy. So a lot of times when people are looking at consciousness,
There we go.
yeah?
Yeah.
You're the man. Thank you so much. The neuroscience and the research says that feeling guilty, you actually do become a better friend, person, because of your moral compass. So research indicates that shows people prone to guilt-ridden people work harder, perform better, and are seen like stronger leaders. And that's because you're giving it your all. We are giving it our all. So it's not like we're 100% and we have 50% work and 50% family. 50% work, 50% family, 50% relationships, and guess what happens on the back end? We forget about ourselves. And that's where this loop, something's broken. And so they say that the frontal cortex, which is the logic and the emotions, a lot of times when children are really little, they don't have a developed frontal lobe. And so the frontal lobe is the parent. The parent is the one that makes decisions for them. The parent is the one that keeps them safe. And so after a while, we're doing so much work for children, we forget how simple it is that we need to turn that loop around and look at all aspects of our lives. So managing guilt, teaching our brains to become smarter about how we handle our desires. By bringing in active participants, by anchoring our thoughts in awareness, which is exactly what we just talked about, being aware of the phone, or being aware of our when we're tired, what day of the week is it? It could be hormonal as well. It could be that the weather changed. I don't know how you feel, but when the time changed, I was so tired for 2 days, and I didn't think that that would really affect me, but it's the circadian rhythms, and maybe some people are a little bit more sensitive to change. There's a really good book out called In Feeling Good, and Dr. David Burns has influenced a lot of therapists. He's a psychologist. I think he's from back east. Anything from David Burns is cognitive behavioral therapy, and his technique is to immediately lift your spirits, almost like an antidepressant. So the good news is that all of the procrastination and the guilt, they're kind of black holes to depression. So if we're not paying attention to being conscious of this, it will take over, we'll feel horrible. We'll probably be mean and cut that woman off who is actually the volunteer in your daughter's school. Or we'll feel incredibly difficult to maybe yell at the children, or at least maybe be agitated a little bit more. So we do want to check in on how to stop guilty feelings, because it is an internalized neurological response to a crime. And so it's our perception to look at how big is the crime. Is it self-crime? Is it a real crime? Is it that you're not volunteering? Is that really such a terrible thing? We can educate our daughters about working moms, and it is difficult. So instead of, the dialogue would be, instead of being in your classroom, here's my time, what can we do best to volunteer in the community? So self-compassion and teaching self-compassion. Disappointment is very difficult to see our children and our families, but it's part of life. Dealing with disappointment starts very little. Like, John took my toy, and I really wanted it, and he broke it. And so in each stages, we get to teach disappointment, and it starts with us, right? So people often feel guilty about, when we're feeling guilty, we have that moral compass. As a result, they're less prone to lie, cheat, and behave immorally, because we're paying attention to that we're even having feelings. There may be people that don't feel guilty. Does anyone know anyone that doesn't feel guilty? So we all suffer from this. Okay, we're all doomed. However, does it make you feel a little bit better to be a little sympathetic, that we are actually giving a little bit of brain power to the neurotransmitters and how we perceive guilt? So when we're taking care of ourselves, it's actually almost giving a little drip of dopamine, serotonin, which is called Prozac, and Wellbutrin. And so we can have these feelings of antidepressing thoughts, because if we feel guilty over and over and over, that's where people do feel very anxious, anxiety, depression, suicide. Unfortunately, that's a subject that people are talking about in our collective community right now. I work in a school, and the schools are not really screening for depression, anxiety, and agitation. And so the families are feeling really pressured because they're not there all the time. It does take a community. And so by you checking in with yourself, how bad do I really feel, and what can we do about it? So the downside to guilt, and then we'll get to the upside of it, is feeling anxious, doing something about it. Even worrying is better than doing nothing. So some people resort to checking out, being on their phone and not even being around the children, or having, just leaving their job even, because they're worried about, and then, living in Orange County, you can't leave your job. So it needs like 3 jobs for Orange County. So instead of doing nothing, your worrying is actually giving you something to do. It's what you do with it that counts. So self-criticism tends to be what we do. And they say that we have 60,000 thoughts a day, and 85% of it is negative. So we really have to keep that into check. Self-criticism is consistent association with less motivation and worse self-control. So when we walk around with the guilt, it's almost like this anvil on our shoulders. How heavy does that get? And that's so you can measure, how guilty am I feeling today? 0 is no guilt, everyone's happy, I love my job, I love that I get away from my kids. And 2, or from 0 to 10, 10 is I feel so guilty, I'm not happy in anything, my job or my family. And so somewhere along that continuum, that's the tension of the opposites, the all or nothing, or the good and evil. And we have to find ourselves on a daily basis where we fit in that. Are we at a 2? Are we at a 5? When we get to like a 7, that's when we are starting to feel sick, not eating well, snapping at other people, road rage, difficulties in relationships, anxiety. Guilt makes you more attractive to behaviors. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. In the brain, when we are guilty, it's housed in the pleasure area of the brain. So when we are guilty, we are feeding our brains with some sort of stimulation. And it could be that we're guilty, but why do we keep doing it? Well, we have to look at it because we make money. Or our children go to school and we're lucky that they go to private school, or that they even live in Irvine or wherever in the surrounding areas. And so we have to kind of keep that a balance. So guilt is that we often feel it after things are pleasurable, like eating unhealthy foods, pizza. We're going to eat it again because we go, yeah, I can deal with that. Or what, you just had
No, I
pizza
was just
for
thinking
lunch?
of donuts.
Oh, donuts, yes. Well, donuts also, the sugar is a serotonin uptake, and it makes you feel good for a little while. So when pleasure is activated, guilt is activated. So realize that when you're going out, I don't know, what else is a guilty pleasure besides donuts?
Wine?
Wine, okay. Yes, absolutely. Well, wine is actually is a depressant. So although it seems like a stimulant and it's a happy feeling, the aftermath of the sugar and the effects of in the brain, it actually is a depressant. So we think that it's going to relax us. Something else we can do, and don't get me wrong, I love red wine, don't get me wrong, but we can like take a bath or have a cup of tea, other pleasurable interests that aren't as defeating. Because if we do too much wine and too much of donuts, well, we all know the consequences. So when pleasure is activated, guilt is activated, and so in our brains over time, these two become connected. So a lot of times we'll feel like, okay, I'm doing well, I've got this business unit that's running really well, and I have an event that we're doing, and this new project is doing well. Oh, but I'm away from my children. And so now we're feeling guilty for doing well at work. And we get so much pleasure for being an effective manager or building a relationship with our coworkers. And it's not necessarily true that it's one or the other. We can have both. So feeling gratitude and not expressing it is like a present that you just don't give away. So you have a present, you wrapped it up, and you're keeping it. And so I'm wondering, how is that serving anyone? So how to stop feeling guilty? Does anyone know how to stop feeling guilty besides this line? How do you stop feeling guilty? What do you do besides wine? Over there. No, it's true. Wine, what is the association to having a cup of tea or taking a bath or having a glass of wine? Maybe to relax our bodies.
I mean, for me, I would probably say my thing right now, I've got almost a 10-month-old. And so for me, there's an element of like jealousy in some ways because my mom gets a lot of time with him during the day. And my husband does as well. It's great. It's a great support unit. But there's also an element that I try to remember, I think about, of the fact that my son is creating a really great bond with his father and with his grandmother. That although I feel like I'm missing out, I'm jealous of their time, somehow disassociating it to and more focusing on their benefit and the fact that he is going to have such a great relationship with them in the future really helps me to kind of lessen my guilt. You know, it's
How do you
selfish.
do that? How do you actually tell yourself one thing over another? Because it sounds really healthy, and it's a choice. So you're choosing to have one thought over another, and you're not falling into the black holes of, I'm not there. Well, you're in a good place, because your community is talking about it, and you have support. The first thing we always ask is, who's your support system? And it sounds like you have one.
That came up, by the way. We had a similar session in LA, and that concept of trust your network, and you alluded to it a few times, came up, and there was some discussion very similar around that too, where it's like, you kind of resent your network, but you need it at the same time. And there was a good sort of open dialogue around, like, if you're going to carry the burden of working and parenting and, if applicable being a spouse, like, there's a point where you've got to say, okay, part of being a good parent is letting, friends, moms, and, dads and others carry some of the burden.
So letting go of the control.
Letting go of the control and trusting that network's necessary, and actually helpful to your child, even though I totally resonate. The point, it's like, but there's a little bit of, I want to be there. And it's funny, the wine, I don't use wine, I use gin and tonic. Probably the same. But there is a little of, I don't know how you guys feel, there's a little of, it's my wife and I high-five each other and we celebrate with the drink at the end of the day because it's like, we did it. Okay, we did it, right? And it helps us stay together too because it's kind of related to what you were saying. There's always the whose day was hardest battle, and it's not even a battle, but there's a little like, oh, I don't want to deal with bathing these kids. And it's like, well, I had a rough day at work and, you Rochambeau. So it is that, that technique of like, okay, this network is good and it's healthy, even though sometimes you can be a little jealous.
Well, of course. I mean, even children fight against each other for time and connection. And it's a human trait to feel jealousy or to feel despair. I mean, these are anger. And what you're saying is the social context of having a glass in your hand at the end of the day represents something to your family or your wife. Maybe, hopefully not your family too much.
We don't let them share in it too often. Depends on the day.
No, it's all about our choices, right? And it is our village. When we don't feel connected, when we don't feel empowered, when we don't have dialogue, we're very alone. And when we're alone, we don't feel the contact of being human. And so by letting others in, it's very easy to be on a vacation by yourself, but it could be very lonely. And you may not be able to do the things that you want to do, like working and having it all. Someone told me this, and I've heard this before, and you probably have too, is, you know, we can have it all. We just can't have it all at the same time. So that's why we rely on, my whole family is back east, so I have to pay for their grandma. I sort of have like a babysitter that acts like grandma. And without her, I'd really feel very disconnected, because it is all the cogs in the wheel that make our families and our lives fulfilled.
Can you actually, related topic, because you do work in Orange County, and I'm interested in how this group feels about it. There is a high keeping up with the Joneses factor in Orange County. Do you guys feel that? Like,
No.
like, I don't know who invented Etsy, but like you can't bring popcorn to a party. Now you have to shape it like a tree or whatever. And you know, and even for me as a dad, like I'll show up to a school event and take time off of work, and I swear to God, like, does nobody work in Orange County? Like they're all in T-shirts and like, you know, high-fiving their kids with their golden retrievers and their pickup trucks, and they're gonna go hiking and. You know what I mean? It's like, I gotta go back to work. Like, there's a little bit where, I don't know, do you guys ever feel that way? It's like, who are these people, right? So I don't know if there's
They changed in their car, the dog is rented,
Yeah.
and they're probably saying this in one of their social networks.
That could be, but I do think that drives guilt sometimes here, where it's like, you know, I see people contributing here, or your perception is contributing here. And just picking up on your point, you want to be contributing there too, you just can't, because we have all this stuff we got to do, you know?
Well, we can't right now, we can't always. There will be a time where I'm not working in a school and a private practice and 8-year-olds. There will be a time that my oldest daughter, right, will be going off to college. And so the whole soccer banquet thing is going to be sad that I'm not doing it. But yet I'm complaining about, oh my gosh, there's so much on my plate right now. Gratitude for where we are and seeking balance. Keeping up with the Joneses. I don't even know if Joneses live in Orange County. It's a whole other sphere here, right? I mean, we have like the property values are 300% over, say, Florida or New York, even in New York, in Long Island, New York. There's so much here that we really do have to keep in check. And surrounding ourselves around soccer moms and our values. What are our core values? And do they match with everyone else? I remember being at a party and my girlfriend is arguing that, she's not here, arguing that her husband didn't buy her Lugano diamonds for Valentine's Day. And I just thought, what's Lugano diamonds? Of course I knew because I flipped through those magazines. But I realized that my values are that my daughter has tutoring and that my children have art and soccer and all the other things that I pay for. These shoes, I bought a consignment. So I mean, there are some concessions that I have to make, right, that we make. So thank you for bringing that up. And you know, even people like Pelican Resort, Pelican Hill, and all, you know, we probably live in. These are our neighbors. Their level, people's level of perceptions are at their level. So they're working 3 jobs. So I was a school counselor at Corona Del Mar High School. And what's happening is the new children at risk are children of affluence, because it takes 4 people to manage a household. And so when we're not home with our children, not volunteering because you are home with your children, but when we're not home and somebody else is there the whole time, and we're so worried about the 5 cars and the 6-8 car garage or whatever it is, I really have to pull back that it can be done. It can be done, but not alone. So one of the things that I talked a lot about is gratitude and having a gratitude list. Not only your support system, self-care list, but a gratitude list. And relaxing in the moments when we can relax. And running when we can and knowing the difference. So cognitive thoughts is cognitive behavior therapy, which is an evidence-based therapy that actually challenges, it's called metacognition, thinking about how you think about things. So if you change the way you think, the things you think about change. So if we're constantly thinking about feeling horrible, or that we're not good enough, or we're not wealthy enough, or our children should be going to Harvard, that's where you live. You live in your thoughts regardless of if it's true or not. So these are very common distortions. It looks a little blurry to me. Oh, you can see those. I just picked the top 10. There's probably about 20 that who can relate to all or nothing thinking or overgeneralizing, jumping to conclusions. I'll share with you jumping to conclusions because I'm big at that. You know, I hear, oh my gosh, the stories I hear in the adolescent world. And there's a lot of them, right? So as a school counselor, like 25, 30 kids, really it's 1 to 250. So you can imagine the workload, the stories that we hear. And self-care is so important to my own family, just to keep it into check, into my own self. Overgeneralizing is pretty easy. I go to that one pretty quickly. Overgeneralizing is my kids are going in the car and go, Mom, it's morning time. You know, the morning routine is pretty chaotic. Everyone's got half an hour to get out the door and shoes on and brush the teeth, hair, and pack up all the food. And then, oh yeah, I got to get dressed too. Oh, we have a dog, got to walk the dog. So overgeneralizing is my kids will go outside to go get their shoes in the car because they left them in the car because I wasn't really good about the whole routine of putting the shoes at the front door because we were at a soccer banquet last night. I mean, it just gets crazy, right? Sometimes I just have to throw it up in the air and just laugh. But there are stories in my head that I hear. My daughter's going out to get into the car and I'm overgeneralizing. Someone's going to come in a big white van, throw them in the car, and they're going to be off to Mexico. I mean, I have to really keep that into control. We can't control that we have to work. We can't control that there's going to be a car and it's going to be white, but it's not the van. So we really have to take a look and challenge these cognitive distortions because they happen all the time. Probably all of these. The one that blaming others hurts yourself and others. Blaming others. Well, you know, my husband wants to live here as opposed to Florida, and so now we're stuck here, and now I can't have that, whatever. And so it's kind of, I don't know if that's anyone else's, but I hear that a lot in my therapy practice. And blaming is always easier. It's always just throw it out there, but you got to reel it in and own something of it. So life isn't fair. That's the fallacy of resentment. Life isn't fair. And if you want a guarantee, buy a toaster, because it's really not fair. And injustice, I hear a lot with adolescents and young kids, because they really don't have a lot of control. They really don't. You tell them exactly what to do, what to eat, where to go to school, and who to play with, and what gym class they're going to go to. So encouraging children to make guided choices. So in the morning you have 3 pairs of clothes. And most of the time they'll pick the ones that don't match. We have to let that go because we gave them choices. Anyone else? Okay, so the guilt reality, I don't know if you can see this one here, accept trade-offs. That's what we were talking about, is accepting the trade-offs or shoulds. Should not be in our vocabulary. Should is like a melting pot of social expectations that will never be met. Should means just like guilt, that you created a crime and you knew better. And that's just distorted. So if you hear yourself say, oh, I should do that, or I should do this, or I should have known. Well, at the time you didn't. Shame on you. At the time you did your 100%. So refuse to buy into the guilt. Practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is literally don't eat at your desk. I say this at corporations. I used to go to doctor's offices. I worked in the health areas of psychotherapy, families going through infertility. And with mindfulness, research says that 15 minutes a day of doing something that's mindful, whether it's walking, whether it's listening to music, whether it's mindfully eating, 15 minutes of guided imagery. Meditation I can't do. I can't sit and listen to nothing because then my brain goes crazy. And guess what? I pull the brain back. That's meditation. meditation is not that I'm in this great yoga position, because I've tried that too. So meditation is bringing your thoughts back to the center of your peace. Wherever you find peace, whether it's somebody guiding you down a beach, you can go to calm.com. It's an app. You can go to MySpace. And mindfulness actually does decrease it increases your immune system. It decreases your reproductive system. So if you are running around and we're trying to be everything to everyone and we're not being mindful and we gobble up our food, I would go to these infertility clinics, and the nurses are dealing with families that are having trouble with infertility, 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 7, and they're eating at their desks while they're filling out the forms. Now they got to go and they got to help some other woman say, oh, I'm not pregnant this month. It's those nurses. I see a lot of nurses that are dealing with cancer patients, infertility patients, and epilepsy patients. The nurses are the ones that get beat down the most. And that population, it gives me reason to do more research on being mindful. Should not be, and then lower your bar to good enough. I had a bracelet. Bye, hon. Thank you. Bye. So good enough. We're never going to be the best parent. We're just going to be good enough. And you know what? They say 30%, research says 30% of parenting, if we're 30% a good parent, they'll be okay. Yeah, 30%. It's out of a book called Happiness for No Good Reason and Good Therapy. And then also being good enough. Who wants to be around a perfectionist? It's difficult. Right? And perfectionism is like feeding a cat. They always come back. So the perfectionist that lives on my shoulder, I have to make friends. We make friends with these people that are playing this loop in our heads. Okay, information, we talked about information processing. Gratitude, self-forgiveness, and self-compassion boosts self-control. So this is an act of being conscious, of having gratitude. I love fresh cut grass, the smell. It just reminds me, the olfactor goes right back to when I was 10 years old and my father was mowing the lawn and it was a spring day and the daffodils. I mean, I have a whole image of it when I smell. So when I walked into Capital One and I saw all the green grass, I immediately went there and I immediately loved you all. So paying attention to these little things in your day. Actually, make a list. Do 20 things of joy, because the guilt will always be there. The time that we can't be there, we have to find ways and pull it out of your pocket to say, I have a gratitude list. I hate getting my nails done, but I have to because I want to look like a professional, but I can't sit there. So that's not one of my gratitudes. But my gratitudes are making lemonade, or give me one gratitude that everyone loves. One thing that you're grateful for in your life. Or joy.
Health. Alive and healthy.
Health. So how are you going to be healthy tonight? That's your question. What else?
Family.
Family. So how can you be with your family right now, this moment? How can you be with your family? I know you all have to go because it's 1 o'clock. So I'm going to wrap it up. So you can be with your family in your thoughts. You can write down a little note and then go off because it's 1 o'clock. So you can do that. You can actually change the way you think. And I have handouts here for self-care. There's professional, organizational, emotional, spiritual, all the self-care list. The other one is, the psychological and personal. So please take one. And thank you so much for sharing who you are.
You guys, can we get a round of applause for Susan? Yeah,
Actually,
grab one on your way out.
Pages. Thank you, whoever is there.
Yeah.